We're in the Vallée du Joux that ordinarily has the well-earned reputation as the coldest spot in Switzerland. Not today. Today we're in the middle of what the French call a canicule, which is very hot weather. And I'm in Le Brassus at one of Blancpain's two workshops. The larger of the two workshops is about 3 or 4 minutes away. It's in Le Sentier, and there are some 700 employees of Blancpain, watchmakers, engineers, technicians, work on the main part of the production. But here in Le Brassus, the world's oldest watch brand, concentrates its work on métier d'art, which is to say engraving, enameling, and other artistic decorations for timepieces, and as well in the same building which Blancpain has had since 1860, the complicated watch workshop. And that's the part that we're going to visit today. We're going to look at the Tourbillon Carrousel. Now, I'm lucky today in that for the next few hours I get to wear the Blancpain Tourbillon Carrousel. And it's this watch that's going to teach us exactly what a tourbillon is and what a carrousel is. Now, to illustrate and to give our tutorial on tourbillons and carousel, we have the tourbillon carousel movement outside of the watch here, and we've placed it under this particular microscope, which is connected to the TV screen to my right. Now, at the moment, we have the microscope focused upon the tourbillon portion of the tourbillon carousel in order to explain what a tourbillon really is. And the first thing you may notice is the color. And the color of the cage, as you see it right here, looks black. In fact, it's not black, because when it's directly lit, what is a mirror finish actually looks black. So the black we see here is in fact quite shiny when you see it in the light correctly. Now, what we're looking at the moment is the tourbillon turning. This is the cage that you see by my finger. And it's carrying the balance wheel at one end, and it's carrying the escapement at the other end. Now, the first tourbillons that were constructed with the balance wheel centered in the cage, and were constructed with bridges on top and bottom. Now, Blancpain, when it constructed its first tourbillon, decided to take some risks and bring some innovation into the construction. And there were two innovations which were part of what Blancpain created when it built its first tourbillon. The first was to eliminate the top bridge. Now, why was that done? That was done in order to increase the visibility of the tourbillon components. Of course, that's more difficult because now, instead of suspending the rotating components between two bridges and two bearings, top and bottom, everything had to be suspended from the bottom. In this case, via ceramic bearings. And Blancpain brought another invention to the tourbillon, which is that it decentered, as you see here, the balance wheel, and decentered the escapement. Now, why was that done? That was done to create a thinner construction, because with the balance wheel centered, naturally more components have to be fitted between the top and the bottom of the tourbillon cage. By decentering, Blancpain was able to eliminate some of that extra thickness. As with all tourbillons, there is power which is delivered to the cage which wants to make the cage rotate. And that rotation is timed by the escapement which is engaged with the fixed wheel. Now, here is the core idea behind the tourbillon, and this is the core idea that lay behind the invention that was patented by Abraham Louis Breguet in 1801. And that is, if a watch has a tendency to run fast in some positions, run slow in other positions, by rotating all of the timekeeping components 360 degrees, the watch will be taken through both fast and slow positions, and those rate errors will cancel each other out. And that's exactly what you see happening here, because the rate-keeping components of the escapement, balance wheel, and spiral are all rotating 360 degrees once per minute, which will have the effect of canceling out the rate errors. Now, key fact about a tourbillon. A tourbillon, in this case, is driven from behind. The powertrain comes up to a pinion which lies behind the cage, and as it delivers energy to the cage to try to make it turn, it's both providing the power for the rotation around the fixed gear and the power for the escapement. Now that we've talked for a few moments about the tourbillon, let's move to the other portion of the tourbillon carrousel, which features now the carrousel itself. Now here we see the carrousel and a bit of history about its creation. Breguet in 1801 patented the tourbillon, and the key components of the fixed gear and the rotation of the timekeeping components was well known after his invention and his publication of the patent. Now, a Danish watchmaker working in Coventry, England, wanted to do something somewhat similar, but also avoid the Breguet patent. And he invented what he called his carrousel. And what was the idea of the carrousel? Basically the same, which is to say, take the timekeeping components of the watch, the balance wheel, the spiral and the escapement, and rotate them 360 degrees to cancel rate errors. But he had to do it in a different way than what Breguet had done in 1801, and that's the carrousel. And if we look at the carrousel here under the microscope, you'll see that there is rotation, and you see the cage, which is rotating, but it's being done in a different way. With the tourbillon, we had a pinion behind the cage, rotating the cage and all the components and powering the escapement. In the case of the carrousel, just as Bonnickson had done in the UK, in Coventry, when he invented the carrousel, we have one powertrain coming to this small wheel that you see by my finger, which is rotating the cage. Now, you'll notice there is no fixed gear with the carrousel, and that's characteristic of a carrousel. Instead, there is additional power coming via a separate powertrain to power the escapement, which you see here. So, with a tourbillon, there is one powertrain doing everything. With a carrousel, there are two powertrains. There are now two versions of Tourbillon Carrousel at Blancpain, the original that debuted in 2013, and a new version that debuted in 2015 called the L-evolution C Tourbillon Carrousel. Now, I've placed the two side by side, the original Tourbillon Carrousel from 2 years ago, and the new Tourbillon Carrousel, L-evolution C Tourbillon Carrousel, which you can see has a much more contemporary, bold kind of style to it. The basic idea of the two movements is the same, a tourbillon and a carrousel in the same watch, both outputs combined in a differential, but the execution comes out to be totally different. The bridges are all entirely different. The feel, the look of the watch is entirely different. In fact, even the construction of the cages is very different between the two. Our focus up till now in the workshop has been the tourbillon carrousel, but Blancpain has more than one tourbillon in its collections, and one of them, and we're fortunate to have it being worked on today in the same workshop, is the 12-day tourbillon. Now, this tourbillon has a 12-day power reserve, automatic winding, which gives it the longest power reserve of any watch with automatic winding and a tourbillon. At the moment, the watchmaker right next to me is just getting ready to take the tourbillon component itself that he has been working on and brought to running order, and now he's going to be putting it into the watch, into its permanent position. So the process starts now with the tourbillon on the tool that's been used for its construction and for its regulation. The tourbillon is now in the specially built tool for this operation, and you'll see that there is a wheel at the bottom, and as the movement is placed into the tool, the watchmaker will turn the wheel at the bottom, which will actually lift the tourbillon into position so that it can be mounted into the watch. It's now being raised. He's making the adjustment so that it's properly positioned. And the pinion, which is used to power the tourbillon, is what's in the center. And you can see the wheel off to the side that is going to drive the pinion, which powers the tourbillon and powers the escapement. Now this tourbillon, for the 12-day tourbillon, is similar in construction to the other Blancpain tourbillons in that it has a decentered balance wheel and is a flying tourbillon. But in fact, it's an entirely new construction because the balance wheel is larger than the other tourbillons, and the spiral is made of silicium. And you can see the watch come to life as the watchmaker gives it its wind in the movement. As we come down from the Tourbillon Carrousel workshop, a place to stop right here, it's irresistible. This is in front of one of the two Métiers d'Art studios in Le Brassus, the engraving studio. There's another studio that does enameling work. And here we see the prize-winning engravings from Blancpain's lead engraver, Marie-Laure Tabarèche. These are the engravings that won the prize in France, the Meilleur Ouvrier de France, or it's called MOF. And we have a watch that she did as well as a portrait that she did. But we reflect on the tourbillon and the carrousel that we examined upstairs, seeing two timekeeping elements to defy gravity, similar in some ways, different in many ways, and both found together in the Tourbillon Carrousel watch.